Stephanie, this is your you're introducing?
Yeah. So hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on critical thinking skills amid a pandemic. Basically, the reason why we wanted to do this webinar is because since the beginning of that pandemic, there's been a lot of information circulating online. Some of it is really good information, but some of it is not necessarily accurate, and it can cause a lot of anxiety uh, to read news that we don't necessarily know that they're not true, but we see them as being accurate, and then it just creates a lot of anxiety. Just before I start, you can ask questions. There's a little Q&A at the bottom. I believe that you will remain anonymous, Jacqueline. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
When you ask questions. Also, we will be recording the meeting. So did you already do that, Jacqueline? Or?
Yes, I've restarted the recording.
Perfect.
Just a couple of housekeeping items as well that I want to mention is that if for some reason the internet kicks me off, Stephanie will just keep on trekking. Or if the internet kicks any of you off, let us know via email and we can send you the link to the recorded presentation, just because, you know, it's not always reliable. We're finding out the internet. So for those who don't know me, my name's Jacqueline, and I am kind of a supporting role in Stephanie's webinar today. So I do have a couple of things to chat about, but mostly just here for technical support.
Yeah. Okay. So also there's going to be a survey at the end. I sent it already in a little chat box. We've had some issues yesterday with the link to the survey not working. It should have been fixed this morning. So you can just fill that out, please. And thank you. That would be appreciated a lot. So I'm going to get started with basically what is critical thinking. So like I said earlier, we have really easy access to internet. So that means we have really easy access to information. And since the beginning of the pandemic, there's, like I said, a lot of information circulating regarding the virus and all the government restrictions. And we kind of don't really know which one is true, which one is not, which one to believe and which one to not believe. So it's really important, especially in times like these, to be able to make the difference between the accurate and non-accurate information, so that way our anxiety isn't so high after reading something that is not completely true. But it can be kind of challenging, though, to make the difference between a legitimate source of information and a source of information that is not legitimate, because sometimes you could find, a non-legitimate source of information and that looks really real and true. So it's important to make the difference. So that's kind of what we're gonna be doing today, teach a little bit how to make that difference between the two. So basically, using our critical thinking skills, that means that we use our judgment in order to determine what is a good source of information versus a not good source. So in order to do that, the first important thing is to take a look at where the information comes from. That's really the first thing that we want to do before going ahead and reading the article. Is it a legitimate website, like a government website, or a reputable body of research? Like, does it come from a university website or a research institute that is recognized? Or does it come from, I don't know, Joe there that just wrote an article about the virus? So we really want to make sure that we know that the information that we're reading is coming from a legitimate source. Until we know where that information comes from, we can't really form an opinion on the information that's presented to us because we don't know if it's accurate or not. We just need to take the information for what it is, basically, before making a judgment. And what it is just information. Don't know yet if it's true, don't know yet if it's not true. And we have a little video here, just to kind of show you the concept a little bit of information.
You guys may remember this video. It was circulated quite a bit in these early 2000s. They actually did an updated version of it, I discovered recently, in the last 5 years, but this is the original.
It's nighttime in a kitchen just like yours. All is quiet. Or is it? The North American house hippo is found throughout Canada and the eastern United States. House hippos are very timid creatures and are rarely seen, but they will defend their territory if provoked. They come out at night to search for food, water, and materials for their nests. The favorite foods of the house hippo are chips, raisins, and the crumbs from peanut butter on toast. They build their nests in bedroom closets, using lost mittens, dryer lint, and bits of string. The nests have to be very soft and warm. House hippos sleep about 16 hours a day.
That looked really real, but you knew it couldn't be true, didn't you? That's why it's good to think about what you're watching on TV and ask questions, kind of like you just did. A message from Concerned Children's Advertisers.
The idea of deciding whether information is a fact or an opinion, if something is real or not real, has really been a debate or a discussion since before Facebook, before Twitter, before a lot of our social media, a lot of the way we communicate now, as shown that this video has been around for a really long time. So it's something to keep in mind that the idea of deciding whether or not to believe a news article or to believe the information that's circulating is true or not true, or is valid or not valid, is something that we've been discussing for a really, really long time. And this is one of the reasons why, we hear the concept of fake news now more and more, because more and more people are realizing that not everything published in writing is a fact.
Mm-hmm.
So to move on.
I'm just trying to move on here.
There you go.
Okay, so that's a little comparison chart, just to kind of show you the difference between information that's being presented and that's based on actual facts, so research, statistics, so data that are tangible, that we can verify, versus information that's presented to us in a form of an opinion. So in journalism, writers' personal opinions on a specific matter are sometimes included in an article because we all have our own opinions about a certain topic. So that means that the actual facts can easily become clouded a little bit in order to match that specific opinion that we have of the event. So for example, someone who believes that businesses and schools should not reopen for another 6 months or so to contain the virus, to contain the spread of the virus, may tell their audience that there are more COVID-19 cases than there really are, just to kind of, if I can say, back up their opinion. Is it a fact? Is it something that's you can verify? You can verify that the information is probably not true. So it's important to look at that. Newspapers, other news website may also be based on the writer's personal opinion. Even big newspapers, I'm not going to name any, but bigger newspapers that sometimes you will read that the writer kind of leans towards either political side or the other. And again, that's normal. It's difficult to write about an event or a situation like this pandemic without adding a little bit of our personal opinion into it. So facts, again, really based on research data. It's super important to remember that when information is presented to us, you just got to ask, okay, where can I find, where did they get that information, basically?
The other thing I want to mention around data is also understanding that population size may play a role. So if they say, 55% of people believe this to be true or not true, remembering that 55% of who did they ask? Did they just ask their neighbors? Did they just ask people that also believe what they're looking for is true, or did they ask a whole bunch of people? So understanding the data a little bit and asking some questions about who did they survey. I see on the news all the time that they surveyed that the public opinion is this, but I'm never asked for my opinion, or I'm never surveyed. So it's really important to keep that in mind as well, is that sometimes facts are not completely true, are completely accurate, because they're not getting enough of the population size. So there's always gray areas.
Exactly, because their population that they used in the survey might be biased. Like Jacqueline said, if I might interview my entire neighborhood about something that does not, that's not relevant to them, and it might just be very different based on who you interview or who you survey.
So it's important to ask those questions when you're looking at facts as well.
So what is a reliable source of information? Once we know where the information comes from, how do we know that, okay, is this true now? So again, there's so much information about COVID-19, and we just see it on Facebook. If you Google, that's probably in the top search there. So it's everywhere on TV also, but not all of them are credible. So we want to look at 4 things when we are trying to determine whether or not the information is reliable. So first, what's the mission and the purpose of the information, the article? Does it aim at informing the public? Does it support a personal cause? Like Jacqueline was saying earlier, if it supports a personal cause, chances are that the information is going to be biased by that person's personal opinion. And if it's just to inform the public, well, chances are that, the information will come from just a place of sharing facts. After that, we want to look at the basis of the information. So that means, is the information coming from scientific facts that have been researched, documented, and approved by in this pandemic case, has the information been approved by health authorities? So the CDC or the WHO, are they approving that information? Again, we talked a little bit about that earlier. Who's sharing the information? Is it someone that's representing a known health authority, a university? In the case of the COVID-19, is it somebody that has extensive medical training? Or is it somebody that is a member of a professional association that's health related? Because if so, chances are that those people have good and accurate information. And the most important is the information current. Sometimes people share information thinking that, you know, it just happened. Oh my gosh, like this is, you know, this just happened. But really you look at the article and it's dated from 2009. I see that a lot on Facebook. Actually, the other day there was, I saw somebody sharing that troops were heading to Afghanistan, you know, and it was just not accurate, whatever that information was. And it was, I think it was dated like 2003 or something like that. So just being careful and cognizant that that has a lot to play too in whether or not the information is accurate.
These are some of the reliable sources that we recommend that people explore for getting information about COVID-19. And remembering that this is, you know, you can always also call the local, your local health unit to get information on COVID. So these are just some government-based or organization-based websites that's going to give you some accurate information that you can trust is based in sound data collection, I guess is the way I would put that. Also remembering that, you know, there is a delay in some information that gets put up on websites as well. So we just really want people to ask questions. So even the information on this website, these websites, it might be good to ask questions about where they're getting it from, where it was posted, when it was posted, that kind of thing. I know the Government of Canada website, especially around Service Canada, if you're on any sort of EI support, it can be very difficult to get through to some of these organizations right now. So it's important to remember that sometimes it's best to call rather than just rely on the information that's on the websites as well, because it does take time for people to put up information in a manner. So to give you an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about looking at reliable information, I have 3 articles titled here. So just to, you know, I mean, if we were doing this live or doing this with more interaction, I would ask your guys' opinion about this, but I'm going to just go through it, and I want you guys to take a minute and say, is this an opinion piece or is this a fact piece? So the first article is from the CTV website, and I can tell you that it was dated 2 weeks ago. And the title is, Should BC Do Anything About the COVID-19 Truthers Flaunting Physical Distance Rules? And so this pops up on your Facebook and you look at it and you click it and you're like, you have a reaction to this article. Whatever your reaction could be. Now, do you think this article is fact or opinion? So just take a minute, think about that. The next article is Vancouver protesters call coronavirus fake news and say distance rules should be defied, appalling health authorities. And so this article comes from a newspaper called the South China Morning Post, based in Vancouver, and it was also posted about 3 weeks ago now. So again, we click on it, we read the article, and we have an emotional reaction to this, this article, and it influences our opinion about what the facts are based in it. The third article is called In the War on COVID-19, Canadians are differential and Americans defiant. Who's right? And this is an article based in the Globe and Mail. Again, it was posted about 2.5 weeks ago on their website. Each of these articles have pieces, and you can Google them and read them if you would like. Each of these articles have pieces of truth in them. However, the middle article about Vancouver protesters, I could not find a single article from another newspaper that talked about Vancouver, people in Vancouver protesting the restrictions. So to me, and based on the guidelines that Stephanie gave us, this article is not a legitimate article where they're talking about something that actually happened. The other clue for that is it's by the South China Morning Post, which isn't a very popular or very big newspaper, especially considering the other two are from CTV and the Globe and Mail. So those are, just looking at the titles, you will have a reaction to them. But when you start clicking and reading them, remembering, okay, is this a legitimate place to get information? Another one that I see a lot is from the Huffington Post. That one comes up on Facebook quite a bit. Majority of that information is suspect to whether or not it's fact or fiction. Because it's not always, you're not always able to get more information from other news articles. And that really, for me, is a key piece to understanding whether or not the information that we're getting is something that I need to be concerned about, or I need to be, have an opinion about or think about. Okay. So some steps to when you're reading an article. The first step is really identifying your own biases. Whether or not a piece of information is fact or fiction, we have to start with where we're starting off. Do we believe what we are reading? Do we trust that the people that are providing this information are going to be accurate? I don't always trust that the Globe and Mail is giving me completely accurate information. I don't always trust that, CBC News is giving me accurate information because of my own biases and my own experiences with them. I have been one of those people that hit, oh, share, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that is not true. I need to unshare that.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Yeah, so slowing yourself down and identifying your own views and your own opinions about things before you start reading an article is really important. Step 2, as Stephanie said, is check the sources. Understanding that not all information is accurate. Not all information is coming from reliable sources. Some information is the newspapers and social media do the same thing we do, where we hit share or we pass on information that's inaccurate. That's how certain things like vaccinations cause this, or that kind of thing can happen and snowball really quickly. It's kind of like playing telephone. That's always what I think about. So trace the telephone back, identify the source, which is actually step 3, which is confirm the information is reported by multiple sources. And that's really important to understand that they are, the multiple sources that are reliable are reporting that information. Step 4 is read past the headlines. And this is really important because, as we saw in my previous slide, those people write headlines. It's advertisement. They're writing them to catch your attention, to get you to read the articles, but actually read the articles. Because that's going to give you the information about whether it's accurate, whether it's multiple sources are doing the same information, and will give you a chance to look at your biases.
And I want to add also, the headline sometimes has nothing to do with the article. Mm-hmm. It's just to kind of, be attractive for readers. So it's important to read the article.
It's one of the reasons we get stuck in the grocery lineup with all of those tabloids. And part of me, every time I read one, is like, I wonder what that actually is talking about. So I pick up I very rarely buy the magazine, but I pick up the magazine and I flip through it. Or I used to. Now I don't touch them. Unless I'm buying them. But I do read the headlines, and I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. Okay. So step 5 is check the authors and their credentials. So as Stephanie mentioned, anybody can write an opinion piece. Anybody can write a fact-based piece. But if they are not coming from someone that has medical training or has an association, or, they're not interviewing, the journalist is not interviewing someone with credentials, it can be really difficult to say that it is a credible source of information. Number 6 is distinguish between news and opinion. Most legitimate news websites have in after their title, so they have, COVID-19 in Ontario, they have opinion written underneath the news article on most newspaper websites. I know CTV, Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, they all do that on their newspapers, physical newspapers, and on their websites. So that is your first kind of go-to look, whether or not that is a legitimate piece. If it's an opinion piece, then you can go into reading the article understanding that it's an opinion. Maybe an opinion that you share and that, which is great. Along with opinion pieces, you just have to remember that they're not set in stone. And as we said, number 7, watch out for older information. I was Googling something earlier late last week, early this week, and I was finding great information about it, but it was from 2 years ago. And so no longer valid, or, it just tells me that the problem that I was looking at had been going on for a really long time. So it's not a COVID-19 issue, that's a website issue. Mm-hmm. And then the last one is use fact checkers to validate content. So there's actually a lot of websites where you can take a news article and throw it through the fact checkers to see how much that is true. So they do that with actually politicians in the States a lot. You'll hear about certain politicians being fact checked quite a bit, and that they're not 100% accurate, or they're blatantly lying. So there are websites that you can go to do fact checks.
So this here is super important. And I'm talking mostly about social media, but just even in real life, because sometimes you read an article or you hear something on the news and then you have an argument or a debate with somebody about that specific event. Right now I see them all over Facebook about the COVID-19 and all the restrictions from the government. So just because people do not share the same opinion on an event or a fact or article does not mean that you're wrong or that person's wrong. Basically, this little picture here shows that there's always 3 truths in a situation. So basically, there's mine, so my truth, there's yours, and there's the actual fact, what actually happened. So what does that mean? It's simply that, you know, when a specific event happens, it happens, it's a fact. But depending on the way that we are brought up to the world, depending on how we were raised, depending on our own belief system, we are going to interpret the event differently. So Jacqueline and I might, you know, interpret one event absolutely differently, but the event, you know, it doesn't change the fact that that's what happened, but you see it a different way than I do. So, you know, there's always, that means that basically when we are writing an article or reading an article, it's never going to be 100% objective, because we will interpret that information based on our own belief system. So it's just important to remember that. And it's the same thing for people who write those articles. When we read them, like I said earlier, it won't necessarily be 100% objective, because they also have their own belief system.
There's a saying in counseling that I use quite a bit, and that's, my thoughts are not 100% true 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. And this picture really, for me, represents that, but it also represents why eyewitness accounts to crime aren't always the most reliable. And there's a lot of psychology science and science around that topic. But it's just something to keep in mind, that just because you experience the same event with other people doesn't mean that you're experiencing the same truth with them. Mm-hmm. So it's, you know, it's really important to remember we can describe the same thing in many different ways. So that note, our supervisor shared this with actually on Facebook, but I think it's really important to remember that right, and especially right now, politics plays a huge role in the information that we're getting. So this is just a very quick visual of what news articles and where they sit on the political scale, because that kind of influences the information that they're providing. So I particularly like the fact that The Daily Show is on this list and where it sits, right? So understanding that The Daily Show and Fox News may sit on opposite ends of a spectrum, they're reporting the same information, but from a different lens. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to keep that in mind. And this is to just give you a quick overview of some of the news articles or some of the news sites and where they sit politically. Yeah. So they're kind of hide this as well. News articles like to think that, or news agencies like to think that they're being completely unbiased, but it, you know, they're not. Mm-hmm. So these are just two quick websites that we use to talk about the difference between facts and opinions, and to kind of understand what critical thinking is. We both want to really encourage our participants, or whoever's listening into this presentation at a later date, to take a moment and think about what critical thinking skills mean to you guys. And why it's important to you to have accurate information. And it's really up to us as individuals to make sure that that is happening. The more of us that demand accurate information from the sources that we're getting, the more likely they're going to provide that.
Yeah. So I didn't have anything else to add in regards to the presentation. Just to please answer the little survey. You can click on it in the chat box. Again, hopefully that link works. And if not, just send me an email and we'll figure it out. We'll try to fix it again.
If you guys have any questions or concerns about critical thinking, or you want to engage in an actual discussion, because of webinar, we don't interact. Stephanie and I would be willing to have a conversation with you about further.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we want to thank everybody for coming and listening in. If you guys have any, like I said, any questions or concerns, please let either of us know. Or if you have an idea for future webinars that you would like us to do, we are here to support in anything that we need. And as a little plug, it is Mental Health Week with the Canadian Mental Health Association. So keep an eye out on our Facebook page for what's happening at the MFRC virtually to support everybody's mental health.
Thank you. I'll end the meeting. All right.